Welcome to the Second Bite Podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome back to the Second Bite Podcast. We have an interesting episode today. My guest, James Gregory, is with us to share some wisdom after multiple years, I guess, Jim, almost a full decade from your last transaction. Very happy that you're here. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Todd. It's a real pleasure to be with you.
First, before I jump in, I want to thank our friends at Fiscal Advocate. They are our sponsor. They help agencies better organize and understand their financials so that they can make real business decisions from them. And so they're terrific. Their contact information is in the show notes for those that want to check them out. So, Jim, tell us, if you will, you've been around for a while. You were doing advertising and marketing before there was digital. So give me the quick background on you and on Core, and let's start there.
Sure. I was very anxious to get into the business of advertising. That was my goal all my life and through college. And when I graduated, I went right to New York City and opened up an office on Madison Avenue. And at 23 years old, I thought I knew everything about advertising and learned very quickly what I didn't know, and got bashed around quite a bit. I was very fortunate to meet a wonderful partner, and this particular woman was very nice to me, as well as being a good business partner, and we got married. So the early name was Gregory and Clyburn. She wanted it to be Clyburn and Gregory, but since I was going to be the face of the organization, I wanted it Gregory. Anyway, we started the business, and our first client was the Long Island Railroad, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And one of the largest commuter railroads in the country. And I really loved that account. I mean, every account that we got, we worked our hardest and gave it our all. And we did really well with that. And we found another account, and we would do anything to grow the business. Well, it grew fairly well, and then we was mostly graphic design and collateral work. We did some advertising, but not a lot. Then the GE, I had heard that they were interested in understanding the way to measure the value of their brand, and Jack Welch wanted to understand if their advertising played a role in and what the return on investment would be.
And what year is this, Jim?
Oh gosh, this is in the early 80s. Okay. And so we started working with them to build the best practices database. So having the GE name opened up a lot of doors for us, and we were able to get into existing databases, but there was just no information out there that really talked about reputation and corporate brands the way we saw it happening. So we developed our own quantitative benchmark tracking system that we call the CoreBrand Index. And we would go out there continuously measuring the brands of 800 corporations.
Was that software or just kind of a process?
It was a process. At that point, there was very little software. We built our own software around it, and so it was telephone calls, doing quantitative.
There you go. Yep.
Quantitative measures, and we created a really slick system for doing these calls, but it was hard work, and we built this database and actually could prove the value of advertising. When a company would advertise, we could see the impact on what we called their cash flow multiple, which in fact is the value of the premium value of stock performance. So we built this and we would be out there talking to CEOs and CFOs of Fortune 500 companies, and some would get it. Some would say that's witchcraft and go away. But the ones who got it, we were able to build this into their strategic value proposition as a corporation. And it really worked for the folks who understood it and worked with us. And then it became a cornerstone of our pitch. So we said, not only do we understand your corporate brand, but we can prove the value of it. If we work together, we can improve the value of the company. So it worked. It worked to a fairly good degree. If we had had a bigger brand ourselves, we could have probably done even more with it. But over time, we became known for this. And the Wall Street Journal and Business Week magazine started getting behind us and promoting what we were doing. And if I can show a couple of books that I wrote for them, McGraw-Hill was my publisher at that time, and everything I did was based on building these books out and having Business Week promote them.
Did that drive much business for you, or it was just kind of an enhancement of your brand?
Well, it's definitely an enhancement of our brand, but it did drive business for us. And it was something that was seen as a little bit of a conflict of interest. When, if you're selling a way to promote your brand, you're advertising your brand, and we are influenced by it, perhaps there would be a conflict that we wouldn't really weigh the brand the same for companies that were our clients as outside companies. Nothing could be further from the truth. We took great pains to do it honestly and have data that would be very fair and understood across all the companies. But in any event, we began to have little cracks in our own company. Our advertising group didn't like our consulting group, and it happens in audit companies too. The same sort of divide.
How large is the business at this time?
I don't quite remember all the details on the size of the company, but we were growing pretty fast. We were at about $10 million of fee revenue. So so it was really starting to grow. We had about 70.
And that's back 30 years ago.
Yeah, well, by the time it got to that point, it was 20 years ago. So it was like the early 90s.
Okay, still pretty good.
Yeah, it was okay, and we had offices around the world. We had Tokyo, one in Frankfurt. We had New York, Los Angeles, and we had a lot of momentum. But a company that's growing fast also is very hungry and needs to grow clients. And what was nice is Business Week sent me around the world twice to speak at every single office they had, every sales office. I would go in and give a speech, sign some books, and then meet with their clients one-on-one to consult with them about how wonderful their brand was or wasn't, and what they could do to improve it. It could not have been better. I mean, it was just really exciting and a lot of fun.
And then it led you to some point where you started to think, geez, maybe it's time to sell this business or this agency. Can you describe that?
Yeah, there was a point where we began to transition. I just felt exhausted. I felt exhausted. I felt I had my best ideas had already been fired, so I'm out there exhausted and not coming up with fresh thinking. I also felt that it was a good time to sell the company because we had a brand. We were known out there for this specialty, and not too many other people were doing it yet. A few were copycatting us, A couple had their own models that were doing something similar, and those companies had much deeper roots. They were bigger companies; they could afford to try things. We were still, of an entrepreneurial mindset, so every dollar we spent mattered, so it got to the point where I was thinking, gee, if we could sell this to a bigger company, and they understood the value of it and the the uniqueness of it, that we could really do some great things.
And that must have been the early teens, right?
Yeah, that was the early. It was like 2005, let's say.
Okay.
Even before the early teens.
Yeah.
So, and what we found in doing that is they didn't understand the small business mindset.
Who's they?
The bigger companies, the holding companies. So they were all interested because they knew what we were doing, but none of them understood the potential for the building a unique system that had great ROI capability. The fact is
That's
that
what you wanted to accomplish in a transaction.
I did.
Ability to leverage a larger business.
Absolutely. I mean, our clients were blue chip clients. When we would land a piece of business, it would stick around for a long time, and it was a blue chip company. It's GE, MasterCard, IBM, Ford Motor Company. We had great clients.
Yeah.
So when we realized that the big holding companies were not, we were not going to be either able to close a deal, or it was not going to be lucrative for us.
So you got offers from some?
Oh, we did, but it was just it just didn't seem like they were in tune with us. I mean,
and that's because I'm assuming the offer value from the holdcos was low.
Yeah, it was a complete earnout, only an earnout. That sort of. They wouldn't pay us much at all for the historic data that we had, which was extremely valuable, and they did not really understand the value proposition. I put that on me. I tried to explain it, and you can tell when the eyes glaze over that you've lost them. That didn't happen often with clients. If it did, you knew which title it would be you'd lose it at, that sort of thing. But anyway, so I began to talk to alternative organizations, people who were not necessarily in the advertising business, but the big consulting companies, the big firms that even the accounting firms. And again, they were protecting their turf, their models, their approach, and didn't really want to hear about a new way of doing things. So this was radically different and a radical departure from the way most people run their firms. So it was hard. It was really hard to find. I'm finding I'm spending a lot of time doing this, and I'm getting concerned about the core business. Even though we had wonderful corporate identity accounts, accounts where our design team was doing really well, our communications team was doing well, and then our analytics team was doing well, but requiring more and more attention. So we finally decided to talk to some folks that were like in the third ring. If you looked at it as a bullseye, who we wanted to go after, these companies were in the third ring. So it was not a target company, but we would have more conversations with them. And what I found out is this company called Brand Logic, Hampton Bridwell is the CEO there. He did understand what we do. He did understand, because he was our competitor. He had to compete against that. He did understand the long-term value. He did understand how to land clients as a result of the research that we had. And that really, we really started to communicate and pull things together based on that. But we couldn't close a deal based on that. We had a lot of simpatico. We had a lot of understanding of each other, but we were still competitors, and we were trying to one up each other a little bit in the negotiations.
And it was just you and them? Or did you have a banker involved?
Well, not at that point. And then finally we got an outside banker to.
So when you reached out to like the larger holdcos and the rest, you did that independently, not through a bank.
Both okay. Ways. When the consulting firm, the banker came in, they kind of re-looked at everything.
Got it.
The most important thing they brought to the table was putting a value on our database, because I had no idea how did
they value it?
Well, they looked at the whole thing and tore it apart and said, how do we go about selling this? How do you sell it? What is the value to the client? And then started, developing a business proposition around that. It was very clever, and it was the most valuable thing I hired them for. I don't think I would have been able to close any deal without their help. The outside party comes in. They have something to gain by closing a deal, but it's like they don't have a pain point in there if the deal doesn't close. It's business. So yeah. It became when we would hit loggerheads, they just talk us through it. And it was like the easiest thing in the world once they started talking to us and we talked to each other.
When you say us, do you mean both sides or just
both sides?
Okay.
Well, they would talk to me, they would talk to Hampton, and then they would talk to us together. And
yeah.
it worked. It really worked. And 10 years later, I'm very good friends with Hampton, and even though there have been some ups and downs in the relationship, like COVID was a kind of a tough period of time for every small business. We worked together to make sure everything continued to work as planned. So it's been great.
And so tell me, as you went through the transaction, and BrandLogic is still a thriving company. When you went through the transaction, what surprised you the most about getting to close? And then tell me a little bit about what life has been like post-close.
Yeah, it really surprised me how long the process took. I probably started thinking about selling the company 5 years before I closed on the deal. That is a long time. I wasn't doing it full time, but I, spent time on it every single day thinking, what are we going to do to position the company? What do we do to clean up our books and make sure that this is the value proposition was well understood? What do we do to pitch it? What do we tell our clients? All those things weigh heavily on the CEO's mind. And so it took much longer than I had ever anticipated. Once I got the consulting firm involved, it took about a year. And creating the value proposition, really rewriting it so that it made sense, rewriting the financials so that the value that I was asking made sense. And then going out and doing a search for potential buyers.
And do you remember the approximate structure of what the deal was like? I remember you said in the first offer you had all earnout from one of the large holdcos. Was this improved from that?
Yeah, it was a set price. We finally came up with a set price. With an incentive if we brought in additional business at that point, so that we were being paid for our assets and we were being paid for our research model, and our whole team would be go over and be solidly entrenched, and all of that worked quite well.
And then post-transaction, did you stick around for a while, or you rolled out of there pretty quickly?
I was employed for a year, and kind of on their board of advisors. I think they could have used me for a longer period of time on their board, but they chose to have kind of a clean break because of the employees. Our old employees were still kind of loyal to me, and they really needed to be part of the new team and wholeheartedly be part of the new team.
Yeah.
And that worked. I mean, we did that. So we accomplished that. I was there if they needed me anytime, so there were a few times, as I said, where there would be a crisis or a problem, and all they had to do was pick up the phone and talk to me, and I give them my best advice.
And if there was one thing that you, in hindsight, wish you would have done differently in that process, what would that be?
Boy, that's an interesting question. I think. Now, I'm not coming up with anything specific on that. There were minor things. They allowed me to continue to access the database, even though they owned it and it was their proprietary information. If I had ideas that I could apply to the database, I would do that. And this gets to the question that you said about post sell. What did I do? I'm not a golfer. I'm not a tennis player. Well, I tried to play tennis, but definitely not a golfer. And I didn't want to play golf. So what do I do? And I went back to school and got a doctorate in strategic business and analytics, statistics and analytics, which was perfect to tie into my database and the research that I had done. So I had complete access to that and developed, really refined our models and really refined my thinking around it so that it was clear that, number one, I proved what I had always been saying. So I proved it in a scientific way, and then I improved the analytics themselves. So my dissertation, which is available to the public, is really quite good if people are interested in this type of subject.
Yeah, and we'll make sure that is available in the show notes. All due respect to that, it seems a little bit dry in that material. You've gone on to write some other things that are less dry, more exciting. Talk about that a little bit, because it's the first one I get, right? Show the first book. Well, you talk about what you know, which is how do you build how do you sell an agency, how do you build an agency, on from there. So that I get, and it's easy to recount your experience. And I'm sure that book is very helpful. But then you drifted and went into nonfiction.
Fiction.
Or into fiction.
Right.
How does that happen?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I don't know. I was driven to write fiction. I love writing. And doing my dissertation, we did so much research and so much writing that I really got into a frame of mind of writing. Even though my background is graphic design, the writing was natural output of that. And so the first book, which my first novel, is called Zephyr's War. And this has been out for a couple of months and is really doing very well. It's Barnes and Noble and Amazon, that sort of thing. And it's about the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, with the America in between. And it's a thriller. It's a thriller because this guy's an entrepreneur who comes to America and thinks that everything's going to be great. And suddenly the Russian mafia is tapping him on the shoulder and asking for a piece of the action. Really a neat thriller. I love this book, even though I wrote it. The second one is now out. This is a proof of it. It's coming out in January of 2025. So this is a pre-read. And this is fun because It's about your worst fears of artificial intelligence. It's artificial intelligence gone bad. And this guy, the main character, buys into this software program of artificial intelligence, and the artificial intelligence takes over his life. It gets into his dating background, his, who he sees, what he does. It takes over the company that he's working at. And it's just a very hungry, ambitious little software.
Well, I will be a reader of that for sure. I think that sounds fascinating. It's also fascinating when somebody has the perspective of years gone by on a transaction. I think a lot of entrepreneurs worry about, what am I going to do with my life after I sell the business? And it's interesting to see somebody just develop other areas of their life, which is part of the reason why I wanted to have you on, James. So I'm thrilled that you could come on. I wish you continued success with your books. A link to all those will be in the show notes. This has been great insight, and I appreciate you spending time with us, James. So thanks for being a great guest.
It was great fun. Thanks, Todd.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.